Welcome to the Illinois Freedom Caucus live stream tonight with 5 state reps and a special guest, Ted Dabrowski. And I just want to welcome everybody to our Tuesday night live stream. We're just going to get this kicked right off. We've got a kind of a busy evening. And so I want to introduce Dan Caucus, state rep from Decatur. Dan, the floor is yours to say hi.
Great to be with you tonight. Hopefully we'll do. Looking forward to this, Ted. This is has been asking about, and we're going to speak with us this evening.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you. The next person I want to bring in on is the chairman of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, Representative Chris Miller from Oakland.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to be here once again with our good friend Ted to bring you some insights on this very important issue to the citizens and also the business of Illinois. As Brad said, I'm the chairman of the Illinois Freedom Caucus and currently serving the 110th district over in the east central side of the state. Well, welcome, and hopefully you will go away feeling your time is well spent this evening.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you. Next person I want to bring up is Representative Adam Nieberg from Dietrich. Adam, say hi.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us here this evening. My name is Adam Nieberg. I'm our state representative out of the 109th district, soon to be the 102nd district. We have a action-packed evening for you with Ted Dabrowski of Wirepoints. So make sure that you subscribe to Wirepoints after this, folks. We're going to have some good information here for you this evening. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. And last but not least, the vice chairman of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, Blaine Wilhauer from Beecher City. Blaine, welcome to the show, and the floor is all yours, and I'm going to let you introduce our special guest this evening.
All right. Hey, thanks, Brad, and thanks for the rest of the gang being here, especially thanks to all of you that are out there listening. At the Illinois Freedom Caucus, our mission is to make sure that you're informed on the important issues that are going on in the state of Illinois right now, and there are a bunch of them, and we are lucky to have with us tonight one of the premier experts on most of the impactful issues in the state of Illinois. As Adam said, if you're not subscribing to Wirepoints, you better do that because all the information that you need is out here. We're lucky to have Ted Dabrowski with us tonight to discuss a really important issue, which is Amendment 1 that is on the ballot. And let's get right to it, guys.
Excellent. Ted, welcome. The floor is all yours.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. Thanks for the kind comments, and thanks for the pitch on Wirepoints. We appreciate working with you guys to talk about the big issues in the state. And Amendment 1, for those of you who aren't following it, it should be at the top of your list of what's going on. We argue that it's probably the most important issue on the ballot because it's an amendment to the Constitution. And if an amendment happens, it's going to last for a long, long time, maybe forever. So basically, this Amendment 1 is really, if I narrow it down to a couple things, it's all about if you want higher property taxes, if you want fewer parents' rights, and if you want stronger public sector union powers, this is the amendment for you. And I mean that seriously because some people want that. However, if you're worried about property taxes being too high already, if you see your parents' rights being slashed over the last few years, and if you're thinking that the public sector, the government union powers are just too high, and which is one of the big reasons for higher taxes and lesser parents' rights, well, then you better pay attention to this amendment because this will impact those tremendously. So I've got a presentation I want to pop up that kind of takes us through Amendment 1 and its issues. But before I do that, I want to share where Illinois is and how we should be thinking about this amendment as we contemplate whether we vote yes or no for it. And Brad, if you can help me get that presentation up, I'd appreciate it. So here you go. For those of you who can, try to make your screen as big as you can so you can see these graphics. But the number one issue in Illinois, when you subtract maybe crime for those people who live in Chicago, the number one issue for a lot of people is just taxes and property taxes in particular. We have the highest property taxes in the country. We're always number 1 or number 2 in the country. This graphic here lays out all 50 states, and it shows the percentage of a house value that Illinoisans on average pay in property taxes. This is done by ATOM, which is a group that compiles property tax data, and it's 1.9%. And, if you were to look at all these different states, you'll see that they're all much, much lower than we are, especially our neighbors like Indiana or Kentucky. They pay a lot less in property taxes, and they still have paved roads and public schools. So this is a big issue. And, even before we talk about Amendment 1 and union powers, we should take this into account. The next slide is we've got the biggest pension debts. And so if we talk about union powers, it's pretty easy to think about government union powers and public sector pensions. We have the biggest pension debts in the country by far. If you can see my little cursor here and I move it around, here's Iowa's debts where my cursor is. If I showed you Indiana somewhere, it's also very low. I can't find Indiana this quickly with all this pressure. No, I'm kidding. But you'll see that Illinois has massive pension debts, and they have no plan. They won't reform pensions. And if this Amendment 1 passes, pensions will never be reformed. And that only means that more taxes, because that's the only way to pay it down is more property taxes, more income taxes. So that's problem number 2 that we should take into account. Problem number 3, for a lot of people, their nest eggs are in their home values. And when you look at home values, and you hear the 50 states again, and this is the home value growth for states in the last 20 years. We have the nation's 3rd worst performance. When you adjust for inflation, our home values have grown 3% in the last 20 years. You've got other states over here on the far right that have grown 40, 50, 60, 70% in their home values after inflation. So their nest eggs have been growing. Illinois' nest eggs have shrunk. So when you take the property tax hit, you take the home value hit, you take the pensions that are going to create more taxes, and then you add to that the fact that people are leaving Illinois. This graphic here shows the number of people who on net have left Illinois in the last 20 years. The IRS adds up who's moving into a state and who's moving to another state. And we have this information. And in the last 20 years, we've netted a loss of 1.4 million people to other states, second only to California and New York. So all those things are hurting us. And the way this plays out is that we have the worst credit rating in the nation. This graphic here shows our neighboring states, and there's credit scores of their states. Moody's does a credit score for every state. And Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, our neighbors, they're all AAA rated. They're pristine credits. They can borrow money easily. And down to the very bottom of the barrel when it comes to states is Illinois. It was close to junk, which is a junk rating, but all that federal bailout money bailed out Illinois. We avoided junk, but Chicago's still junk. So you take those issues, you take our credit rating is horrible, people are leaving the state. You take into account that all those things. Okay, now, do we want to add an amendment to Illinois? And let's talk about what this Amendment 1 does. It's called Workers' Rights. It's called Amendment 1. Let's see what this Amendment 1 would do. And this is the precise language of the amendment. And I've broken the language into 3 separate pieces so we can understand it. Let me read this first one. And what this first part does, it cements all the public. Now, I'm going to focus on public sector unions. I'll tell you why I'm not talking about private sector unions in a second, because this doesn't really impact private sector unions. It only impacts government unions. And so what this amendment does is it takes all the powers that already exist. When you think about the Chicago Teachers Union and its power to strike, when you talk about the union's power to effectively shut down schools or force mask mandates, or to force vaccines as they've done, those powers will be shifted from state law and they'll be put into the Constitution. Those powers will be cemented into the Constitution. And on top of that, new rights are given to the government unions. So let me read what it says. It says, employees shall have the fundamental right to organize and to collectively bargain. Okay, so there they have a right. Just like freedom of speech and freedom of religion, the public sector union workers are going to have a right to organize and bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing for the purpose of negotiating wages, hours, and working conditions, and to protect their economic welfare and safety at work. Now, they get two new things added to this on top of those rights to organize and bargain collectively. And that is to protect their economic welfare and safety. Now, if you know the public sector unions, they already have a lot of protections. They have all these guaranteed contracts. They have guaranteed raises in their contracts. They have all kinds of retiree health benefits. They got the pension protection clause. Well, now they want something else called economic welfare protections. Now, think about that. For a union, what impacts their economic welfare? Well, any kind of property tax reform that might lower your property taxes is likely to affect their economic welfare. So let's say you want to consolidate a couple school districts, and that might cost a few people in the government sector their jobs. Well, they might say, well, that impacts my economic welfare. You can't do that. Or they might say, hey, for more safety at work, we want to force mask mandates in schools, or we want to force vaccination in schools. Well, they'll put that in the contract. And if it gets into the contract, well, good luck trying to change that. Now, I say all that because now listen to the second part of the amendment. And this part says, so the gentlemen who are on this call, the legislators, would effectively be worthless when it comes to this stuff, because not only does the amendment cement all those powers into the Constitution for the government unions, but then it says no law shall be passed that interferes with, negates, or diminishes the right of employees to organize and bargain over their wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment, workplace safety. So now it's saying that even if the legislature wanted to do something to lower property taxes, to remove some of the powers of the unions, or said differently, to give something favorable to taxpayers and ordinary residents, well, it says no law shall be passed that diminishes their powers. Well, then how the heck is anything ever going to get reformed so that we have tax hikes? So this looks like a one-way ratchet. One-way ratchet meaning taxes never go down, taxes only go up. And given that they have new powers on economic welfare and safety, then you can imagine the taxes will only go up faster. The third part of the language says that this is the only time where the private sector really comes into play in this amendment. And that is right to work. So right to work, states that are right to work, Illinois is not a right to work state today, but states that are right to work, they give their workers the choice of whether to be in a union or not. They're not forced to be in a union in order to have employment, in order to keep their job. Those are right to work states. They actually give workers freedom. Do you want to be in a union or not? You choose in the private sector. Well, Illinois is not a right to work state, but Indiana is a right to work state. Wisconsin is a right to work state. Michigan is a right to work state. Iowa is a right to work state. Kentucky is a right to work state. Those states have become more competitive because they give their workers a choice of whether they want to join a union or not. Only Missouri is not a right to work state. So this amendment would block forever Illinois becoming a right to work state. And that's not good if we're trying to be a competitive state and attract businesses and more workers. So when you combine those three sections that I've given you, no other state would give their government union powers like the ones that Illinois gives. Illinois' powers for government unions would be the most extreme in the country over taxpayers in setting policy and impacting taxes. And that's what's at stake here. And then, of course, we also would not be a right to work state. An important point, if I can remember it, well, I'll come back to it in a second. So one of the things that I want to point out is you'll see many ads on TV about workers' rights. And those ads tend to be about private sector workers. And they're making the claims that they will have more protections and that, that the government, or they'll be protected against the greedy owners of hospitals or greedy owners of companies. Well, all of that, when they're saying all that, none of that matters. None of it's true, because this amendment does not affect their rights in the private sector, because all that is covered by federal law. it's superseded by federal law. So whatever the state does with regard to private sector, and did I skip a slide here? Whatever the state does for the private sector is covered by federal law. So this amendment doesn't impact them. They're running those ads to try to get more votes, but they should be ignored. The only thing that matters with regard to the private sector is whether they are right to work or not. So what kind of powers will these unions have in Illinois? Well, let me explain something about Illinois, or let me explain something about, like, let's say South Carolina, Virginia. They prioritize their ordinary residents over the unions. Their collective bargaining is illegal. The government units, like, for example, a school district cannot, it's illegal for them to negotiate with the teachers union. So in other words, the unions don't have the power there. It's the ordinary people that have the power. At the other extreme is Illinois, where our governments, like our school districts, are forced to, they are required to, it's compulsory that they negotiate with the teachers union. And the teachers union, if they don't like what they get, they can strike. Strikes are protected in Illinois, and they're not protected in any of our neighbors, but in Illinois they are. So we're already today, even before Amendment 1, our unions have extreme powers. Our government unions have extreme powers. As I mentioned, we're just one of 13 states where strikes are legal. None of our neighbors allow strikes. So that's a power that would be maintained in this constitutional amendment. Another important power that our unions have in Illinois is they get to bargain in secret. I tell the story of I just read recently of an administration that just negotiated with the teachers union, and the newspaper reported that the negotiations had been finalized. And at the end of the article, it said the public will soon find out what was agreed to once the contract has been signed, which is amazing, right? So we have our administrators negotiating for us. The unions are there. There's no taxpayers in the room. We don't get to find out what's negotiated till after the fact. And that's the kind of protections that they will continue to maintain under the amendment. I'm going to skip a few of these slides here. Another thing that they, for example, protect are these crazy pensions. So these are the top pensioners in Illinois. You'll see the name of the person who's the pensioner. These are all superintendents. This is the retirement ages. They all retire in their 50s. These are the current annual pensions. And these are the expected lifetime pensions those people will get, anywhere from $8 to $9 to $10 million. So these are the kind of things we would be protecting with this amendment. Also, you've seen some of our presentations and work on education results. I can just say that they're horrendous across many parts of the state. Single digits reading capabilities for many school districts for different groups, and even low double digits. With their powers, how do we ever change school districts? How do we ever reform things in schools if they have all these amendment powers? I want to come back to one point. This slide should have been earlier. When I mentioned that the private sector is not covered by this amendment, I mentioned this because federal laws preempt state laws. They preempt the state constitution. They supersede whatever's done here. And just for clarification, it was the sponsor of the bill, Senator Ram Villavalam, who was quoted in the committee hearings as, and he said this: as federal labor law stands today, the amendment could not apply to the private sector. So you'll hear lots of people when you talk to them argue, oh no, this is good for workers' rights and all that. It's just not true. It doesn't touch workers' rights. And if it does anything in the private sector, which I mentioned earlier, it covers right to work. And here's the ironic part. The workers' rights amendment bans right to work. If you can't figure out the irony in that, then it's a tough one. So in summary, let me kind of summarize here. Yeah, here's what supporters of this amendment might say. Man, a supporter will say, this gives our government unions the most power in the country to fight for more compensation, more social justice programs, and bigger tax revenues. And if that doesn't sound like something they'd say, they actually, if you go read stuff that they say, they are saying that. Supporters are saying they give more power, more benefits, and they're happy with that. Some of them are happy that the unions would have, the teachers unions in particular, would have more power, for example, to push DEI, critical race theory, sexuality education. They're happy they'll be able to push it without interference from the parents. Much like Terry McAuliffe, who was running for governor in Virginia, said when he said that he said parents shouldn't be deciding curriculum. They don't want parents in the room, and so this amendment would block parents from being, at the negotiation table. Supporters would also say that this would be really good because just like the Pension Protection Clause, which blocks reforms to pensions, this one would protect bargaining rights because they can't be diminished. Lawmakers can't pass laws. And so they'd like that. And you'll also be, of course, hearing people cheer that right to work is blocked, but that's not good. What the opponents would say, and probably most of you guys listening here would want to hear what the opponents have to say. Look, an opponent can easily say that no state in the country will have the powers that Illinois government unions have. They will be the most extreme powers in the country, and they'll have extreme powers to affect policy, raise taxes, and diminish the power of taxpayers and ordinary parents. An opponent would say that why the heck does the government union worker get protected on pensions, get protected in their work contracts, get protected by the Constitution over the negotiating power? Why do they get all these benefits? And then why does the private sector, the ordinary Illinoisan, who doesn't get any of these benefits, isn't protected by anything in the Constitution, why are they forced to pay for these public sector benefits? It's just not fair. Another couple things that opponents would say is, look, Illinois already pay the highest property taxes in the country. This amendment will only push them higher, and we'll never see any cuts in property taxes. And that'll push even more people out of the state, and the spiral will get worse. A last complaint that an opponent might have is, look, COVID showed us just how many powers we lost. Parents had, how little power parents had during COVID, right? We're shut out of our schools. We're forced to wear masks. We're forced to do remote learning. None of that worked. Then they've been pushing critical race theory. They've been pushing sex ed into the kindergarten classes, forcing vaccinations. We saw how much power the unions had and how little power the administrators had. This amendment will only make things even worse. So I'd say that's kind of the debate. There's a lot more to touch on, but I'm happy to answer questions on that. But thank you guys for letting me get through that part.
Excellent, Ted. Do we want to, there's your contact information. We'll leave that up for just a moment.
A couple of things here. The contact information, I can't remember which QR code this is, but on our website, if you go to our website, we have a red button that has Amendment 1 on it, and it will take you through more of the detail. You can download some stuff and go through this a little bit more slowly on your own pace. And there's my contact information. Anybody can contact me at any time, and I'm happy to answer.
Excellent. Excellent. Ted, you and your team have definitely done the homework. You're getting national attention to this and many other stories and things that you're reporting on the current status and the condition of the state of Illinois. Ted, is there anything else on this presentation you need, or can we take it off the screen and kind of open it up?
Yeah, you can take it off the screen. Yeah.
And then we'll just kind of open it up to the panelists here, our rep colleagues, and see what questions folks may have.
Ted, this is Adam. I was getting this question quite a bit, and maybe you could answer it for the audience here. What will this take to pass? Is this just a simple majority, or when you change things on a constitutional amendment, what does that look like for the voters? Yeah,
so it takes a 3/5, 60% vote. So it's, any constitutional amendment it has a tougher hurdle to pass, so 60%. So from that perspective, it's tougher to pass, but a lot of people don't know about this. People should be talking about it as much as they can, sharing information. Please send them to our Amendment 1 page, but people need to know, because if people don't know and they just see the ads, it says, workers' rights, this is good for workers' rights, or people think that, then of course they'll vote just based on that.
Right. And another concern that I have, as well as probably the other reps that are on this town hall this evening, is the costs associated with this. If somebody has a particular pension and they're drawing on that pension, if this passes, the cost, property taxes are going to increase. Do you possibly see? I know that our treasurer Michael Frericks has actually talked about this. Can you possibly see these pensions being taxed in retirement income, which is something that we don't do in the state of Illinois, but to pay this unfunded pension liability? Do you possibly see that happening down the road?
Well, it's certainly a possibility, because, Governor Pritzker wanted this progressive tax to come on. And if there was a progressive tax, then that would have allowed, for example, retirement income to be taxed progressively. And, when you talk about this amount of debt that we have, we showed you the 300-something billion at the state level, and then that doesn't cover the local. There's local pensions and Chicago pensions, Cook County pensions. The numbers get over 500 billion when you add it all up. They're going to have to figure out how to tax everything. If we never have pension reform, they're going to have to figure out how to tax everything. So a starting point with all this, of course, is not letting this amendment pass, because this amendment would make things like pension reform also very difficult.
And I think that's very important, Ted, to bring that up. Everybody on this call has sponsored or even submitted to the General Assembly pension reform, which the Democrats do not want to talk about. They want nothing to do with that. But if we do not reform the pension system, even the public sector unions, your retirement income when you go to retire is more than likely going to be taxed. So if you don't give us an opportunity to reform the pension system, the working class folks, your pensions, they just won't be around.
Yeah, and Adam, just to finish that point, you mentioned Treasurer Frericks. He didn't mean to say it, but he did, probably because I should say he didn't mean to say it. He meant to say it, but he probably wishes he hadn't. But yeah, the taxation of pensions right now. Pensions are not taxed, and some of those pensions, the average pension in Illinois is about $80,000 a year. Starting pension, I should say, for career workers is about $80,000. So, it's certainly a source of income if they want to go after it.
Excellent, Ted. And here's a commenter that says they're going to be voting no on Amendment 1 and sharing the stream. And I guess as our other panelists and other questions and comments come in, I would just encourage our viewers to like and share our content here, and share this with your friends. And if you can share the YouTube links, text and email any of that stuff, or however you can get that word out. We're down to 28 days from today, 27 days, 28 days from now. We'll be probably hearing who the next governor of the state of Illinois is going to be. So we're down to the short rows here on how much time is left to get the word out.
And something I think is important also, and I know that we've fought continuously on this issue, is the critical race theory, and things such as SB 818, the sex ed bill. And thank you so much to all the school districts that opted out of that piece of legislation. But when you give additional collective bargaining rights to these teachers unions, watch out, folks, because the wokeness in our schools is here.
Adam, that's an important point, and we've already seen, for example, and I mentioned the Chicago Teachers Union a lot because they're the leaders. They push the extremes on everything, and they a couple of years ago they negotiated. They tried to put in things like affordable housing into the contract, and they're trying to do that again right now. So if they can get things like affordable housing, which has nothing to do with school, they wanted to defund the police. They were trying to negotiate some of that. They tried to use their powers in anything. And that's without Amendment 1. That's without that additional language of economic welfare and safety. Once you add those rights into the Constitution and powers for negotiation, God knows what they'll want. And it's very easy to think of them sitting across the administrators and saying, another variant of COVID is coming up, and we want every kid to be vaccinated before we come in, or we want everybody masked. And we've seen a lot of administrators just give in. We've had some great school administrators who haven't given in, but most of them rolled over during COVID. And so if they roll over and agree to stuff in their collective bargaining agreements, looking at the way the Constitution, that amendment is written, I don't see how any of you guys on this call here would have the power to turn that over, or everything will be in the courts all the time. And, that's certainly not the way we want our state to be run.
Excellent.
And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with sex ed in the K through third grade. The unions want that stuff in there. And what's to keep them from having the power to put that in there? And, certainly with some of the school districts who want that as well, there's a bunch of administrators who would love to have that in there. So once it gets in there, who is going to push back, and how do you get pushed back if you have this amendment?
I think one of the things that we're trying to do as we work through this process is educate the public. And I think that it would behoove us to mention that the Democrats are continually on a misinformation campaign. It's just like Adam mentioned, SB 818. Now, listen to the title of SB 818, Keeping Youth Safe and Healthy Act. Keeping youth. And I mean, it is the farthest thing that we could ever imagine of keeping youth safe and healthy. And then it's the same thing with the workers' rights amendment. I mean, it's a travesty that they can be allowed to label these bills that are completely the opposite of what they're saying, because they know that people are typically headline readers, and so they aren't going to look at the content. And so what they're trying to do is bamboozle them into voting for a bad bill, which will devastate families and small business here in the state of Illinois.
You mean similar to Safety Act and Inflation Reduction Act?
Right. You could go down the whole list, But it's a misinformation campaign because they don't have any big ideas that are actually going to reform and restore Illinois. It's all leading to the destruction and globalism.
Now, Chris, if I can make one quick point that I forgot to mention. In discussing this with colleagues and anybody who wants to debate, it's important to understand. I showed you that comparison of South Carolina and Virginia to Illinois. We have some of the most strong pro-union laws already on the books in Illinois, far stronger than virtually every state in the country. So they already have all. They don't need this amendment because they already have the right to organize and collectively bargain. They have all those things. They have the right to strike. They have the right to negotiate in secret. All those things exist already today. Yeah. So what's interesting about this amendment is if it fails, if people vote no, the unions don't lose one itty bitty power that they have today. So it's not like a vote no takes away union power. It just keeps it the same as it is today. It's the opposite ways that if it's a yes, then it cements those powers. It gives them even more powers. And you're sticking stuff in the Constitution. You should only put very few things in the Constitution that are meant to never be changed, like freedom of speech, like freedom of religion. Those things should never be changed, and that's why they're in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But the rights to organize and bargain and all that's legislative stuff. That's policy stuff. That's for lawmakers, and that's why different states have different levels of bargaining rights, and that should stay that way. It should not be cemented in the Constitution.
Ted, I had a question from a viewer. It popped up a while ago. I'll put it back up there. I don't know if you can speak to that. The question about McDonald's employees or folks that are kind of in those entry-level spots. What's it do there?
Some people are trying to argue this is going to give them more powers, but as I said, they've got those powers. Those powers are set by federal law. They supersede. The federal law supersedes, preempts state law. So, they can, people like at Starbucks are pushing unionization. They can push wherever they want.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'll leave it there.
Okay. All right. Good. Gentlemen, any other thoughts maybe as we close this out? Any questions for Ted while he's here? Things that you're hearing from your constituents?
Ted, I don't think it can be stated enough, and you've done a great job of it tonight, the difference between the effects on the public sector and the private sector. and what is being portrayed in the media, what's being portrayed in this multi-million-dollar ad campaign, that this is actually, for workers' rights, and even going further than insinuating that it's for private sector unions, which are clearly governed by the National Labor Relations Board. And I just want to implore to the folks out there to see through that nonsense. You've said it very clearly. The public sector unions in this state have had the run of the place.
That's right.
For 2 decades at least in this state. And how are things for you? How are things for the regular working class people, especially in our part of the state, where every bit of industry, every bit of good high wage jobs has been driven out of here because of policies like this? This is an unprecedented political power grab, and people need to see it for what it is.
Yeah, Blaine, let me echo that. This isn't to hit on individuals in the public sector and the government unions. It's a system that's become super powerful. Good for them in many ways, right? They've got the biggest pensions, they've got some of the biggest negotiation rights, but it's also created a problem that we got like two classes of workers in Illinois now. One class is guaranteed pensions, lifetime pensions, constitutionally guaranteed. A class is guaranteed long-term contracts, 3, 5, 7-year contracts with guaranteed raises in them, guaranteed benefits, the right to strike, the right to force arbitration, massive powers. That's one class. And the second class is the private sector. They don't get any of those benefits like that. They have none of those protections, and yet they're forced to pay for the first class. And, of course, the government sector is always paid by the private sector, but we're creating two extremes, and it's why people are leaving Illinois, because it just becomes too expensive for them to live here. And companies can't afford to be here either because it's just too expensive to operate here. And that's the kind of the vicious circle we're in right now. And this amendment, of course, would make that worse. And, again, some people want that. They're going to vote for it, but either they don't understand what they're voting for, or they're being, I guess, in the end, selfish. But we'd like to see Illinois become vibrant again, and we need, more power for people, the ordinary people, more rights for ordinary taxpayers, not less.
Exactly.
That's right, Ted. Yep. Thank
Adam,
you.
we'll go to you here just in a second to close out. We'll just kind of go in reverse order the way we started up here a while ago. But Ted, to your point about business and business friendly or unfriendly, the news broke late last week, early this week, that Tyson is moving 500 employees back to Arkansas or into Arkansas. So again, another giant company here that had settled into Illinois is decided to make a move out again. So not good news once again. Yeah. Adam, any closing thoughts, Adam?
Oh, I think it was stated very well. Thank you, Ted, for coming with us here this evening. And folks, you need to look into Wirepoints. You need to subscribe to them as soon as you get done watching us here this evening. Their emails are vitally important, so you know exactly what's going on in the state of Illinois. And I think everybody did an excellent job. If you are a small business owner, this should infuriate you. If you're a working class individual in the state of Illinois, trying to make your way through with high inflation at the gas pump, paying exorbitant amounts, this should infuriate you because your taxes are going to go up, because this benefits the folks in the public sector unions here in the state of Illinois, as small business owners are being ran out of the state of Illinois. So, Ted, thank you so much for being with us here this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Chris, any closing comments or questions or concerns for Ted?
Yeah, I'd like to echo everything that Adam and the rest of you have said this evening. It's great to have an opportunity to remind people of the things that are destroying our state, and and it's inflation and illegals and incompetent leadership. And we have a great opportunity on November 8th to change a lot of those things and put Illinois on a course of recovery. The rising costs that we see are just absolutely killing working families. And currently this devastating inflation is being brought to us by generations of career politicians on both sides of the aisle. And I know on November 8th, it's time to line up and fire the frauds.
Excellent points, Chris. Excellent points. Dan Caucus, we'll let you kind of wrap it up here, and we'll go to wrap this up this evening.
Thank you being with you tonight, Ted. We appreciate you being here. I would encourage everyone that's watching this, share this presentation on your Facebook page. That this information is out here. That the vote yes people have dollars of Governor Pritzker's war chest. Another piece of his run for president of the United States. I think he'd be the most far left radical governor. He thinks that that's going to make him more appealing at primary in 2 years. We've got to am I breaking up right there?
Just a touch. We're getting most of it, Dan. So,
well, let me just wrap this up. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I look forward to doing this again next week.
Excellent, Dan. Blaine, did we get all the things that you wanted to have said tonight? Did we get everything you wanted to say before we go?
Well, Brother Brad, I always have a lot of things to say, so I could be here all night. But what I say is that Dan is better tonight than he has any of these other times, but is still not up to par, Dan. So we got to work on that because we need your voice in here. But, guys, I've said it a million times. I've said the floor of the House. I'm a working class guy. I literally climbed off a pole barn into the General Assembly, so I don't need, Gold Coast elitist Democrats telling me about how to support working people. What we hear all the time in the General Assembly. We all want wages to rise. We all see that. We all see that. And the Democrats all the time are talking about economic empowerment and equity and all of that, but they're missing the point. There is no economic empowerment. There's no equity or any of that if you're constantly pushing policies that remove opportunity. If the state of Illinois is going to get on the right track, we need to start pushing policies that bring opportunity here. Opportunity does not come without investment. I know that's kind of a dirty word in Springfield with our elitist Democrats, but we have to have job creators come to this state and invest to create opportunity and to create upward mobility for working class folks in every part of this state. So, that's what this thing is all about at the end of the day. What is going to be the future of the state of Illinois? Are we going to continue to, literally codify a special interest, I guess, into the Illinois Constitution? Or are we going to actually make some reforms to bring opportunity back to this state? Killing this amendment on November 8th is a major step forward in doing that. So thank you, Ted, for being here tonight. And we just appreciate you, and get out there and vote, everybody. When this is a huge deal.
Yeah. Excellent. Well said. Blaine, last 2 years ago, they wanted to open up the Constitution on some revenue with a graduated tax change. Now we want to bake some special interest provisions in, but we don't ever talk in Springfield about some real important reforms to open up the Constitution, some political reforms like term limits and redistricting reform. We never get those, or spending reform. Let's put the pension question on the ballot for voters to decide, but we never get those opportunities in Illinois to open up the Constitution for those things. So, Ted, with that, I'm going to give you the last word. We got a lot of favorable comments coming in tonight. People appreciating the time that you've taken and everybody to kind of deal with this issue and answer any questions and bring and present the information. So, anyhow, Ted, the floor is yours as we close out. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, guys. Thank you for your leadership, all of you, and for bringing up the issues. I mean, you're one of the few groups that will actually talk about the issues in detail, take them on, and so that's so important. That your constituents are lucky to have you guys. And so thank you. And I remind people, come to wirepoints.org, sign up for our daily newsletter. We'll give you the news the way we see it. We aggregate news on both sides for you every day, and then we also give you our own research or commentary that we write every day. And then there's that Amendment 1 page that lays out the details. It shows you who voted for Amendment 1, who voted against, so you can get that detail. And it's a good place to send other people who don't understand the amendment. Just send them there. And we're happy to answer any questions anytime. And we love challenges too, because we like to be challenged on what we say. So thank you all.
Ted, thank you. Thank you to my colleagues for joining with us tonight. Guys, just tune back in next Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. The event will go up on everybody's social media early on Tuesday morning. We've got another great stream planned for you next week and over the next several weeks as we get close to the end of the year. With that, good night, and we'll talk soon.